So imagine this. You wake up, the alarm is just blaring in your ear, and it is still pitch black outside.
Oof, the absolute worst way to wake up.
Right. And before you have even thrown the covers off, your mind is just instantly racing. You're mentally sprinting through this to-do list that feels completely unmanageable.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Like the inbox zero you completely failed to reach yesterday.
Exactly. Or, the tense meeting scheduled for 2 o'clock, the laundry mountain waiting downstairs.
It is a very specific, almost visceral sense of morning dread.
Yeah.
Because the day is already demanding like 1,000 things from you before you've even had the chance to take a single deep breath or even put your feet on the floor.
But what if you could fundamentally change the trajectory of that entire day in just 30 seconds? Like while you are still lying there in the dark.
Wait, really? Just 30 seconds?
Yeah. What if there was a mechanism to make the gridlock traffic you are about to sit in, or that difficult 2 o'clock meeting and even the endless laundry actually count for something on like a cosmic scale?
I mean, it sounds like an incredibly lofty promise to attach to 30 seconds of your morning.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mhm.
Because our mission today for this depth dive is to figure out exactly how one specific, very brief prayer acts as a total life hack for the soul.
I love that framing.
We are diving into a comprehensive guide on the traditional Catholic morning offering prayer. We're going to explore how this brief invocation basically claims to consecrate every single mundane task you face today without adding a single extra thing to your schedule.
Which is key, right? Nobody wants another appointment.
Exactly. And our sources cover everything from its really surprising 19th century origins all the way to a line-by-line theological breakdown. We even get into the practical habit-building tips for how to actually pull this off.
And the documents we are looking at are fascinating because they take something deeply mystical
Right.
and, well, they kind of drag it right down into the mud and friction of our daily routines.
Yeah.
But to really grasp how this functions, I think we need to look at the environment that birthed it. Because it wasn't written by someone sitting peacefully in the sunlit garden, contemplating the universe.
No, not at all. It was actually born out of intense, hair-pulling human frustration, which honestly makes it incredibly relatable.
Right.
So the guide takes us back to December 3rd, 1844. This is at the Jesuit Seminary of Valls, which is located near Le Prix in rural France.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and you have this priest named Father Francis Xavier Gautrelet. And he is basically managing a severe morale crisis among his young seminarians.
Because these are young men who are just burning with spiritual zeal, right?
Exactly.
They are reading letters that are arriving from these Jesuit missionaries doing incredibly dangerous, heroic work overseas. Preaching the gospel in India, North America, facing down real peril.
Yeah, real frontline stuff.
And meanwhile, these seminarians are just stuck in a cold stone building in France, memorizing Latin verbs and reading dense philosophy textbooks.
They felt entirely useless.
Completely. They want to be on the front lines, but they are stuck in the academic trenches.
It's the ultimate feeling of being benched during the championship game. So Father Gautrelet comes up with a theological solution to this very psychological problem.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, he basically tells them that they do not need to cross an ocean to be missionaries. Every single act of studying, every headache from reading small print, every boring lecture.
If it's consciously handed over to God.
Right. If it's handed over, it can be offered up for the missions and for the conversion of souls right then and there.
And that specific spiritual insight became the spark for what we now call the apostleship-of-prayer. By the 1860s, Pope Pius IX had formally endorsed it.
Which is wild how fast that spread.
Yeah, it exploded. This practice of the morning offering became a massive foundational fixture of Catholic life around the world.
I do want to push back on this a bit, though.
Sure, go for it.
Because when we talk about offering it up, I feel like we run into a massive wall of modern cultural baggage.
Oh, absolutely. The phrase has a reputation.
Right. Many of you listening probably grew up hearing the phrase offer it up, used as a really dismissive way to shut down a complaint.
I mean, you scrape your knee as a kid, or...
Yeah, or you vent about a terrible day at work and well-meaning people just say, well, offer it up.
Yeah.
It can sound a lot like toxic positivity, just a spiritualized way of saying, quiet down and deal with it. So how does the theology in our source material separate itself from just, gritting your teeth and pushing through pain?
What's fascinating here is how the source material carefully disentangles that exact misconception. The text is actually very clear that this is not about silencing legitimate pain or pretending you aren't struggling.
Okay, so it's not ignoring the bad stuff.
Not at all. The deep theology of the morning offering is about consciously joining your personal, isolated frictions to the suffering and love of Christ on the cross.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. And the guide grounds this in a very specific concept from St. Paul. In his letter to the Colossians, chapter 1, verse 24, Paul writes about completing what is lacking in the afflictions of Christ.
Which, I mean, on its face, that sounds like a radical claim. It almost implies Christ's sacrifice wasn't enough.
It definitely sounds that way at first glance, but the text clarifies that Catholic tradition has never viewed Christ's redemption as insufficient or flawed.
Right. That would break a lot of rules.
Exactly. The concept is that Christ intentionally chose to leave room in his Römer, his redemptive work, for our active participation. He essentially built a framework that, well, it requires our collaboration.
Wow.
So when you offer up that morning headache or the acute loneliness you feel on a Tuesday night, you aren't just suffering in a vacuum anymore. You are plugging your small struggle into this massive redemptive engine.
You're basically handing it over in advance. And the guide highlights that the morning offering is the formal act of doing exactly that.
Right.
Like, before the day even unfolds, before you know if you're going to get a promotion or get a flat tire, you sign the blank check.
That's a great analogy, the blank check.
And it transfigures the difficulty. Because, look, if you sleep terribly and drag yourself into the kitchen, the prayer doesn't act like a magical shot of espresso.
Unfortunately.
Right. The exhaustion still physically tires you, but the exhaustion no longer goes to waste.
It completely rewires the economy of suffering. If you sit in traffic for 40 minutes, it is already offered.
A difficult, tense conversation with your teenager.
Already offered. The person who prays this in the morning becomes, in a very literal sense, someone who is praying all day long simply by enduring the friction of living.
If this brief prayer has the power to transfigure an entire day like that, we really should examine the exact mechanics of how it accomplishes that.
Yeah, let's look at the words.
Because the traditional text, the one used by the Pope's worldwide prayer network for nearly 2 centuries, is remarkably dense. Every single word carries immense weight.
It is incredibly efficient theology.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The prayer opens with the phrase, "O Jesus, through the Immaculate Heart of Mary." Right out of the gate, it utilizes this classic Catholic framework popularized by St. Louis de Montfort.
Ah, yes, the principle of adiatum per Mariam.
Exactly, to Jesus through Mary. And the source guide uses a brilliant analogy to explain why the prayer is routed this way. Imagine a toddler trying to give a gift to a parent.
I love this part.
The child hands over this crumpled, messy piece of paper covered in crayon scribbles. It is objectively not a masterpiece.
No, it's usually barely recognizable.
Right. But the other parent steps in, takes that crumpled paper, smooths out the edges, puts it in a beautiful frame, and presents it to the first parent as a flawless treasure.
That is a perfect visualization of the dynamic this opening line invokes. Mary's understood as purifying and presenting what we, with our messy and distracted intentions, simply cannot present perfectly on our own.
She frames the scribble.
She absolutely frames the scribble.
So beautiful. We then move into the core inventory of the day. The prayer says, "I offer you my prayers, works, joys, and sufferings of this day."
It covers all the bases.
I am really struck by how sweeping that is. It divides your entire human existence into 4 buckets that capture absolutely everything you will experience between waking up and going to sleep.
Right. Prayers covers your deliberate spiritual acts. Works is the spreadsheet, the laundry, the commute. Sufferings handles the inevitable frictions and heartbreaks.
But the inclusion of joys is the one that often catches people off guard.
It really does. People forget to offer the good stuff.
Yeah, and the text makes a point to emphasize that joy offered to God is doubled. You are consecrating the small, wonderful moments too, like a fantastic cup of coffee or an inside joke with a friend, or just the feeling of getting into a warm bed.
That's such a comforting thought.
But then we hit the line that the guide suggests is the most overlooked powerhouse in the entire prayer, in union with the holy sacrifice of the Mass throughout the world.
Oh, man. This is where the scope of the prayer becomes truly cosmic. Since our audience understands the foundational theology of the Mass, the guide doesn't waste time explaining what it is.
Right, it assumes you know.
Instead, it focuses on the scale. It uses this striking phrase, describing the global Mass as perpetually breaking the surface of time at thousands of altars every single day at every hour.
You aren't just remembering a historical event. You are stepping into a continuous living reality.
Exactly.
By saying those words, you are grafting your Tuesday morning commute directly onto that timeless sacrifice. You
Right.
are no longer just an isolated person drinking coffee in your kitchen.
No, you are anchored to the altar.
And that communal aspect expands in the second half of the prayer, too. You offer all of these works and joys for the intentions of the Sacred Heart. So, the salvation of souls, reparation for sin, the reunion of all Christians.
Then it scales up to the global church hierarchy, offering it for the bishops, and finally, in particular for those recommended by our Holy Father this month.
Which ties this ancient 19th century theology directly to the modern news cycle.
It really does, because in 2014, Pope Francis took the original apostleship of prayer and updated it into the Pope's worldwide prayer network.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yeah, the rebrand is fairly recent,
Mm-hmm.
and every month, the Pope releases a specific, actionable global intention. It might be for civilians caught in conflict zones, or for those suffering from depression, or even for the ethical use of artificial intelligence.
Wow, so it's highly relevant. When you pray this in the morning, you dynamically link your personal daily frictions to whatever that specific macro intention is for the current month.
It creates a fascinating bridge. You are just sweeping the floor in your kitchen, but spiritually you are participating in a global movement directed by the Pope.
All of this theology is incredibly profound, but, well, it inevitably hits the brick wall of human memory.
Oh, absolutely. The human brain is flawed.
A 30-second prayer is completely useless if you are sleep-deprived and simply forget to say it.
Very true.
The guide acknowledges this and leans heavily into practical application. How do you actually build this habit in the real world when your willpower at 6 a.m. is just non-existent?
The guide relies on the behavioral science of anchoring. We know that floating intentions, telling yourself, I will pray more in the morning, they usually just evaporate by Wednesday.
Yeah, motivation fades fast.
So you have to bolt the new habit onto an existing, unbreakable physical routine. You let your environment, not your willpower, trigger the memory.
The sources suggest some very tangible anchors, like the physical sensation of your feet hitting the floorboards when you get out of bed, or the sound of the coffee grinder starting.
Or the act of squeezing toothpaste onto the brush.
My personal favorite is using the car. The moment you sit in the driver's seat, before you allow yourself to turn the key in the ignition, you let the physical object remind you.
And for the initial learning phase, the guide really highlights the utility of audio tools. Stumbling over memorized words in the dark can create a sense of failure that just makes you abandon the habit entirely.
Oh, for sure. The source material specifically brings up using audio resources to bypass that frustration. They mention an app called Ave Audio.
Right.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, that brand is pronounced Ave, like the Latin in Ave Maria, not Avenue.
Good distinction.
Yeah. The text suggests that using a tool like Ave Audio for just the first 3 weeks while you perform your morning anchor task will cement the habit effortlessly.
It takes the pressure off.
Totally. Also, new accounts receive 60 free credits to explore dozens of prayers. You just play the audio, listen to the prayer spoken slowly and reverently, and pray along in your head while the coffee brews or you brush your teeth. It completely removes the friction of rote memorization.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of a sustainable Catholic morning routine, the guide actually outlines what is essentially the ultimate under 1 minute practice.
I am all for under 1 minute practices.
It requires just 3 steps. First, the physical sign of the cross. Second, the recitation of the morning offering. And third, asking God one simple orienting question. Lord, what do you need from me today?
That entire sequence takes under 60 seconds. It is intensely approachable.
Furthermore, the Church actually provides a formal spiritual incentive for doing this. The guide points out a detail in the Enchiridion of Indulgences.
Okay, we might need a quick refresher on that for some of us.
Right, so the Enchiridion is essentially the Church's official handbook that catalogs specific spiritual graces, which are called indulgences, attached to concrete acts of piety.
Right, and a partial indulgence is simply the Church opening its treasury of grace to remit a portion of the temporal consequence of sin.
Exactly. And the Enchiridion specifically grants a partial indulgence for devoutly offering your work to God at the start of the day. The Church is heavily incentivizing this simple 30-second act because of how fundamentally it reorients the soul.
The guide also notes that the traditional paragraph isn't like a rigid law. If the classic formulation feels too long, or if you are trying to teach this to children, there are entirely valid, shorter forms.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah, it highlights the Carmelite form, which is rooted in St. Therese of Lisieux.
St. Therese is vital here because her entire theological framework, the little way, was built on doing extremely small things with immense love. She wasn't out seeking martyrdom. She was seeking holiness in picking up a pin off the floor.
So a shorter prayer aligns perfectly with her spirituality. The guide also mentions the classic children's form, which is just, "Oh, Jesus, I give you today all I think, say, and do, in union with your love for the Father and for me."
So simple.
The emphasis is that a brief, simple prayer prayed consistently is infinitely more valuable than a complex, perfect prayer left unsaid.
This raises an important question, though, about the reality of human failure, because the perfect routine will eventually fracture.
It absolutely will. So what happens when you wake up late, the dog is throwing up, and you miss your anchor entirely?
Or what if you say the words, but you feel absolutely zero spiritual connection to them?
Yeah, or worse, what if you face an absolute tragedy by 9 a.m.? Does this whole system just break down when life gets sideways?
The guide is incredibly practical here, actually categorizing these sideways days into 3 distinct types.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first are mechanical days. This is when you say the words while you are making the coffee, but your heart just isn't in it. You feel entirely emotionally detached.
Like you are just reading a script.
Precisely. And to address this, the text brings in the heavy hitters of spiritual theology, like St. Teresa of Avila. She spent years, decades, even experiencing absolute emotional emptiness in prayer.
Wow, decades.
Decades. And she wrote extensively about the discipline of faithfulness and dryness. The core teaching here is that the supernatural worth of the prayer comes from your will and your intention to pray, not from the warm, sensible consolations or fuzzy feelings you might get while doing it.
The lack of feeling doesn't invalidate the offering?
Exactly. Then you have the second type, the forgotten days. You just flat out fail to say it in the morning.
So what's the fix for that?
The solution here is rooted in grace, not rigidity. The church does not bind this prayer to a clock. If you suddenly remember at 11 a.m. while you were aggressively deleting emails, pray it right then.
Just do it in the moment.
Right. It still consecrates the remainder of the day. If you remember as your head hits the pillow at night, pray it then, offering the day retroactively or preparing for tomorrow.
Habit research demonstrates that a single missed execution doesn't actually destroy a routine. What destroys the routine is the psychological spiral of treating the miss as a total failure.
If you miss Tuesday, you just pray it on Wednesday. Give yourself some grace.
Yeah. But then there is the third category, which the guide soberly refers to as heavy days.
These are tough.
Yeah, these are the days where something truly awful happens early on. You get a terrible phone call or a diagnosis. On those days, a little 30-second rhyming prayer feels almost insulting in its smallness.
This is where the theology proves it isn't just a polite morning platitude. The guide quotes a very raw, powerful phrase from the early apostleship of prayer literature. The morning offering meeting the noon disaster.
The morning offering meeting the noon disaster. That is a hauntingly accurate description of how life works.
It means that the sudden tragedy isn't a glitch in your spiritual system. The morning offering specifically includes the word sufferings in its inventory.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was architected for exactly the days that feel too heavy to bear. The noon disaster is not a bug. It is the very feature the prayer was built to handle, because you already handed over the reins before the disaster struck.
And for those moments when the weight of the day completely strips you of your ability to even formulate a thought, the guide reminds us to lean on the wider resources of the church.
We don't have to do it alone.
Exactly. It points out that platforms like Ave Audio have entire sections dedicated to prayers for the sick and suffering. These are designed for exactly those moments of crisis when you cannot find the words yourself, and you just need to let the tradition pray on your behalf.
It acts as a safety net for the days when the morning offering is merely the first step of a very steep, painful climb.
So what does this all mean? When we synthesize all these sources, the unique genius of the morning offering seems to be its radical accessibility.
Yes, radical is the right word.
It requires no specific geographic place. It doesn't demand the intense, prolonged focus of praying a full rosary or sitting for an hour in Eucharistic adoration. It completely levels the spiritual playing field.
Anyone can do it.
A cloistered monk in a silent monastery and a single mother trying to feed 4 chaotic children before the school bus arrives, they can begin their day with the exact same spiritual efficacy. It transforms the frustrating work that was going to happen anyway into a profound prayer that would not have existed otherwise.
It takes the raw, unpolished material of a regular, messy life and infuses it with eternal weight. Which brings up something I think is crucial to dwell on as we wrap up.
What's that?
If we take this theology seriously, if offering up your day truly transfigures every minor annoyance, every friction, and every moment of stress into a spiritual asset,
Mm.
how does that fundamentally change the way you view the people who cause those frictions?
Oh, wow. That's a paradigm shift.
Think about the incredibly difficult coworker who constantly undermines you in meetings, or the erratic driver who cuts you off in gridlock traffic.
They usually just ruin your morning.
Right. But if you have already handed your day over in the dark before you left your bedroom, those people are no longer just obstacles to your peace. They suddenly become unexpected, profound opportunities for your own spiritual work.
They are the very material of the offering you made to God.
Exactly. And that perspective shift, seeing difficult people as spiritual assets, might be the most powerful life hack of all.